Good afternoon.
Hi.
We're sending you this video today in part to summarize the information I'm sure you've been hearing about work that's been going on in the Senate relative to the transportation bill. As you know, we've been trying to make the transportation bill a priority for some time, and it has emerged over the last several days as legislation that was introduced by Mr. McConnell, who is the Republican leader of the Senate. There are many things in this bill that are being discussed now. Some of them concern, of course, how this bill gets paid for, something that you in particular have been hearing from Scott and I and the rest of our staff for quite a bit of time. We've been very concerned about that issue. We don't want to address that today because this is only the beginning of a legislative process about this legislation, but we do want to take some time to go over with you several things that are in this bill that are remarkable improvements and ways that our advocacy with Republicans has paid off in making some real improvements in the transportation bill. As you know, even though we've been very frustrated with the Congress, in this instance, we think that our bipartisan efforts have paid some substantial dividends to the future of the program. Again, we have to keep in mind that these are legislative proposals at this time, and we can hope that they'll be developed into full legislation. But the changes we want to discuss that Scott's going to present today are significant improvements over several vital and important issues, ones that we're going to be watching carefully and ones that we wanted you to know about. In some respects, we're not widely publishing these at this time because some of them remain controversial. But Scott, why don't you go over some of the major ones that we think are real improvements that you and have been working on in this bill and been working with our friends on the Senate Transportation Committee at Banking for some time now.
Thanks, Dale. It's been a very hectic and busy week, and I think will continue. Overall, the environment that we had been talking to you about and that we thought would prevail has indeed prevailed. The bill we're looking at from the Senate raises us from about $10.8 billion overall in the transit budget to $11.8 in the first year of this proposal and increasing up to a little over $13 billion by 2021. And I bring that up because we've been saying all along that we thought modest growth was where the Congress was going to fall, and indeed that's proven very much correct. So within the bill, first of all, it's a 6-year bill, which is a good thing. The first 3 years are paid for. The next 3 out years are a little less so, but we've been saying all along we wanted to see some predictability and have been very clear that a 6-year long-term bill is what we were looking for, and indeed the Senate is working on something that meets that kind of structure. For some of the core programs that we're all interested in, I'm happy to report that 5311, the Rural Public Transportation Formula Program, 5310, the formula program for seniors and people with disabilities, they both grow fairly significantly over the period of the bill. The rural program grows by about $94 million from the first year, 2016, to the final year, 2021. The 5310 program grows by almost $50 million in that same time frame. Of course, we can't talk about any of this without talking about the bus issue and bus capital. We've made that a priority. It's been a priority with us for the last 2 years, really since MAP 21 passed, so the last 3 years. And this bill is vastly an improvement over what we see in MAP 21 when it comes to bus capital. First off, it has the fastest growing component in the bill percentage-wise is bus formula and discretionary bus capital. So capital funds to replace buses is the fastest growing segment of this bill, something we certainly have been advocating for. It raises that state minimum, which used to be at $1.25 million, up to $2 million, which is a good thing. It also creates something that we had been advocating for, a discretionary program with first 10% of that set aside for rural communities, which we're very much in favor of, and also that is about a $190 million program. Altogether, we've gone from $427 million in 5339, or the old bus formula program, to this proposal being about $740 million in the first year, and that growing over the time frame of the bill to over $800 million. It grows to almost double where we are now. And for those of you who've been paying attention, we've been talking a lot about trying to get back to that split of 40-40-20 that we used to see in the old 5309 program. We had been down to 9% in that program. This boosts bus capital dedicated funding to 13.5%. There's also some interesting things in the bill when it comes to operating assistance, and interesting things mean to us, we think, really significant improvements. One, at long last, demand response systems that are operating in urban areas can get the operating assistance flexibility that the 100 bus language in MAP 21 offered. That's a technical correction, but it's one we've been promised for the better part of the last 3 years. We were very happy to see that find its way into this bill. Second, and interestingly, language that Jeff Rosenberg with the ATU and I wrote in 2010 and 2011, dealing with operating assistance flexibility. Some of you may remember this fight, dealing with flexibility in the operating assistance issue based on unemployment levels in communities, so that even if you are a large urban area, you would be able to flex some of those formula dollars, those 5307 dollars, over to operate your system and thus avoid raising fares, shutting service down, or at least cutting some parts of your service, found their way amazingly into this bill. Now, the unemployment rate that is kind of the benchmark for this language is 7%. In 2010, that allowed a lot of systems to be able to take advantage of it. 5 years later, the unemployment rate is much lower. But what this really is a great safety net feature program in the 5307, so that if we ever run across periods of significant economic decline, or in the case of what we dealt with at the end of the 2009-2010 period, serious recession, this provides a safety net that would be there, so systems would be able to flex money where they need it. And lastly, we were pleasantly surprised in the bill that it increases the small transit-intensive cities set aside in 5307 from 1.5% to 2%, which is a minor. 0.5% may seem minor, but to the small urban members that are joining CTA now in good numbers, that's a pretty good deal. So we were very pleased with that as well. Debate on this bill will take place on tomorrow. It will really start tomorrow, and will likely go through the weekend. The Senate is on track to try to get this bill done, and the House has its 5-month extension already passed. So that's what we're dealing with right now, is the push-pull between the House's concept, which is we'll deal with this in September after the August recess, and Senator McConnell's clear desire right now to get this done now, get a highway bill done now. So the clock is ticking. July 31st is when the current extension ends, and something will have to get done by then. The question, and we'll keep you up to date, is whose priority or whose vision will win out in this. Will it be the House with a 5-month extension to the middle of December and no changes, or will this more complete bill take the place of that in terms of what the Senate's doing? So with that, that's kind of the update. I encourage, ask any questions, shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to chat with you about any of this. The full transit title, the Banking Committee's explanation of the bill, and a table that shows all these funding levels, current and then the 5 and 6 years of the bill is all on our website at cta.org, right on the homepage. You can download those and take a look. In fact, I'll attach all those to this email so you have them handy if you have any questions. So, Dale, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I hope you're enjoying the words that are appearing behind our heads while we're finishing this, since obviously our picture's been timed out. But I do want to add one or two things more in addition to this. One of the other issues that has appeared in the Senate bill that is very important to many of us and many of you is a relooking at the coordination issue, especially as it relates to medical transportation. And there are requirements in the bill on the discussion of developing some kind of better cost allocation plan and to put more emphasis on mobility management as a tool in dealing with the medical transportation issue. I think, again, this reflects some of the issues that we've been raising in the Senate and with Republicans for several years. As Scott said, there are important other aspects of this bill that are important to us because they do reflect some of the more high ground moral issues that we've raised about transportation funding in the past. This issue about the unemployment compensation and the unemployment rates being the basis for giving transit systems more flexibility in the economic circumstances they're in is absolutely something we've been pushing for quite some time. In a way, it reminds me that several years after Hurricane Katrina, we were finally able to get legislative requirements that transit agencies would not be penalized because they didn't have their formula or matching funds available. This is kind of like a companion piece. We've been pushing it for some time, but it does mean that some future people will have the benefit of this, just like those people had the benefit of the situation relative to Katrina during the last big storms that we've had. So these are kind of good and permanent changes that I think that reflect well on the program. The other thing I think that reflects well here that we do want to mention too is one of our goals, ours, Scott and mine, yours in particular, has been trying to get across to people that we need to have more of a national transportation focus. And I think the aspects of this bill, especially the rural and the small urban, look toward a much broader national picture. We are especially pleased that Republicans in particular are supporting some of these concepts. We think it's directly related to what goes on in rural transportation, small urban transportation, and certainly medical transportation around the country. So these add to our overall goals of trying to get that vision of a national transportation piece added to this legislation every opportunity that we have. The last thing I'd say too is that, look, we understand that this part of the process, which came in a very unexpected way, is actually the beginning of the process. Yeah. This is going to take a while to sort itself out. You'll be hearing lots of criticisms and lots of concerns. We ourselves had major concerns about where the revenue was coming from to pay for this bill.
Yeah, we continue to.
Including scary ideas that somehow it would be linked to Social Security payments and all kinds of ideas that some of which died in the Senate yesterday and some will continue to materialize. Regretfully, the honesty about raising taxes to pay for this hasn't emerged as part of the discussion, but maybe some honesty in government is still possible. So a generation ago, President Kennedy, in a similar situation, used the phrase, "We're not at the top of the hill, we're actually at the side of the hill." We're at the side of the hill on this legislation today, but in a better position than we've been. I want to specifically thank all of you who responded to our request to reach out to certain members of Congress and the Senate, particularly John McBeth for reaching out to a Texas senator who isn't Ted Cruz to help us with this, as well as some of the fine work that's been done by our bus partners, especially last year's award winner Ed Redfern, who, by the way, in a meeting yesterday said, "I don't understand where you guys are coming from, but it seems like everything that you wanted got into the bill." We had some people from labor say the same thing. We're not sure that's exactly true, but for today, we're taking credit for it. So let me say thanks to all of you for doing those small things. I think, again, some of that work we did with our state delegates and our members over the last year, especially about getting in touch with their member, reminding them what they're doing, reminding people that public transit does include taking people back and forth to dialysis, has paid off for us with the most conservative people in the Congress. So we're very grateful to your help. We're going to stay out and look at this as it develops. As Scott mentioned, much of this information is on our website. Some of this discussion between us is going to remain confidential for a while, but we do appreciate your help. We think progress is being made, and we are certainly very pleased that our core message about the value of community and public transit has emerged here at a very partisan time with strong support from Republicans. So I think that's all we have for you right now, but we will be in touch. And again, regardless of what you hear, if anybody asks you to do anything, please let us know about it. But we're going to stay close and focused to this, and hopefully next week we'll get back to you with some additional updates. So thank you very much, and for the time being, let's just keep our fingers crossed if that's possible in Washington, and hope that as this piece of legislation moves forward, we will also get some people to take an honest look about paying for this bill, not just for transit, but for highways. So thanks for now. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for all your hard work on this,
Sure.
Especially the person who has been smart enough, kind enough, and willing enough to go and deal with the Republicans on a day-to-day basis, something that all of you know I'm not very good at. Thank you very much.